some new prerogatives, but we repatriate some of the powers, so we will try to develop a new kind of balance. The difficulty with this approach is that the future is, like Alice in Wonderland. In order to stay in the same place, you have to run fast. From the global perspective, this kind of, meddling through approach, like keeping a balance, may not be effective. I mean, Europe will not be able to solve its existential problems by sticking to the idea, let's remain as it is, essentially. The third gear, the drive gear, is associated with the federative idea. Federation, more powers. Some papers were quoted, liberals, the Spinelli group idea, the new draft of the European Constitution, etc. And many politicians, including leading politicians, believe that the crisis would push Europe to make the jump forward, jump into the unknown. But it's not happening. And it will not probably happen because the public is not enthusiastic about it. You cannot sell now the concept of federative Europe to the public. So the future is wide open. Probably like in the past, it will be decided by a very pragmatic process. Challenges and the way we solve them. I would be tempted to say that there will be new elements of federative powers. Probably the Eurozone will simply force some new federative arrangements. It cannot survive without it. But it will be what Habermas calls executive federalism. It means that member states, in particular the big member states, even if agreeing to new integration projects, will want to stay in control of it. Will want to be always capable of putting necessary brakes or even reversing the project. The future of the European Union, some people say, may be decided in Ukraine. At least how far Europe can enlarge may be decided in Ukraine. The predecessor was referring to the speech of the new president, Poroshenko. I was watching it myself in the hotel room, and I noticed that the room rose twice during the speech. Once when Poroshenko said that Crimea was, is, and will be Ukrainian soil, and the second that Ukraine will join the European Union.
This could be a very bad moment.
I am saying this because this was the reaction of the people, and I suspect that yes, Ukraine will push if successful, if they really can follow the Polish approach, meaning we want to be in the European Union against all odds. If they are successful, they will put on the European agenda the very fundamental question: can the European Union embrace Ukraine, and what kind of European Union it should be, that it can work both ways, for the Union and for Ukraine. Concerning enlargement, we are now more or less where the Roman Empire was at the beginning of the 2nd century, when they were discussing, should we enlarge or should we play the Limes game? Inviting Germans from across the Rhine to serve in our armed forces, or be to labor force, like guys from Macedonia work somewhere, in Germany or elsewhere. And the rest be essentially bribed by heavy assistance programs, money, pump the money, which was what the Romans did in the beginning of the end of the 1st and 2nd century. Some people say that EU enlargement policy is exactly the same. They are close enough, like the Western Balkans, close enough to be admitted when the day comes, but it can be postponed forever while keeping the people more or less happy. The case of Ukraine is completely different. It is take it or break it. And therefore, I suspect that it can be a big challenge for the European Union, not only in terms of its geographical expansion, but also in its internal constitution. My final comment on the future of Europe. I detect behind all these strains and crises signs of the future. And the signs of the future are the following. European societies are undergoing a very deep transformation. It's based on demography, aging. It's based on the diversification, the inequality factor. Whatever we say about the book by Piketty, I think it's real. The growing disparities are real, and Europeans do not know how to cope with them. Thirdly, it is the diversity problem. Migrants, and so on and so forth. So you have a number of factors which transform the European societies, and the Union, or the European Union as we know it, is unbelievably inefficient in coping with these long-term processes. Why? Because the whole idea of solving political, social, and other problems of European societies was based on the paradigm of growth. In fact, the fetish of growth. And if all these predictions about the end of the era of growth are true, then Europe in particular, more than the United States and any Western society, has to learn how to solve its political, security, social and other problems without the magic wand of growth. How to do it? My modest reply is justice. The concept of justice in all its dimensions, retributive, distributive, and others, is probably for Europe as such and for the European Union the only paradigm of solving long-term challenges. But I am an optimist about Europe.
Thank you very much, Piotr. Okay, we have plenty of food for thought, plenty of different inputs here. I will really open the floor. I ask you to defer the questions that come more on the foreign policy a bit later, and maybe focus more now on the European Union and Europe. Please introduce yourself and ask the question first, and then if you really need, then provide the context in which your question is. But I will be also happy if you don't provide the context. People will understand from the question, I believe. The floor is yours.
My name is Slavish Odasic from the University of Maryland in the United States. I was curious about this Eurozone comments, and especially about Mr. Zahorka's claim that there was no crisis of Euro and of Eurozone. So I would like to hear comments about it, especially when we look at a few countries that didn't have the Euro recently, like Poland and Czech Republic. Whether the crisis easier or it was easier for them, right? A good reason for that, they could depreciate their exchange rates, and we can look at the other side, Greece or Portugal and all the southern countries. They couldn't do that, so they didn't have that advantage. And I would say that almost a consensus is that is the reason why some of these countries had it easier this year. So how can we square that with the claim that there was no Euro crisis? A related issue, if you got 10, 12 years back, and we look at what the economists were saying at the time, a lot of American economists, regardless of the ideological span from Paul Krugman to Milton Friedman, were against that. So from all kind of the entire spectrum of economists were against the Euro on this basis, that you can't, your countries can't deflate it or depreciate it at will. So how can we? Do we still stick to the claim that it's not the currency, the Euro crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions on the Euro and the Euro crisis? Egert?
Yeah, I'm Egert Papen from ESI. Two small questions. One, you said enlargement in an internal paper foreseen for the Balkans until, let's say, 2021. Seems to be quick to me. Does this include Turkey? Because is that a Balkan state for you? The second question concerning convergence, is the Euro project actually increasing or accelerating convergence?
I think let's get back to the panel, and then I will collect another round. There was a question on the euro. I believe Hans-Jürgen should start, but then as well for the other panelists. Feel free to chip in.
Okay, first, last question first. Well, this was an internal paper from 2006 or so. But I mean, internal papers are able to be adapted always. And it's still valid, basically, because it's possible. And in the European, and if a country starts from a certain point 0 and should go on 100 to namely the level when they can join the European Union, they seldom do it in a linear way. They go first down and then they go up. They go up in a exponential way. Thank you. And for instance, whoever had thought in 1994 when Latvia declared its political will to adhere to the EU, that 10 years later this will be done. That was out of the minds of everybody. And a couple of years later, Latvia is part of the Euro. So all countries joining the European Union cannot opt out. They will have to adopt the Euro. And this is no crime because the Euro is nothing bad in general. If this includes Turkey, a clear answer, no. These were the Western Balkan countries. Turkey is another chapter. Turkey, in a certain way, is suspended de facto because of Mr. Erdogan. Turkey will never be a member of the European Union with a government under Erdogan. Full stop. That's it. I mean, that's it. I mean, we cannot accept someone in the European Union who tries to prohibit social media, whose family is evidently corrupt and so on. This is not possible, and we are getting more and more restrictive in these ways, especially in these ways, after some little flops we had in the past, including Hungary now. But I mean, this is not a reason to throw out Hungary because there will be some kind of election and so forth. But we have to take care the fact that some politicians start in a very constructive way, but later Erdogan 2 or Orban 2 or 3 may be different and maybe even counterproductive to what the European Union represents otherwise. So Turkey in general would be welcome. It would be for market dimension reasons or for foreign policy reasons, Turkey would be a progress for the whole of the European Union. But not with these elements which are impossible and incredible and not acceptable at all for the European Union. That's what I have to say to Turkey. At Turkey at present, no. Although I've always been an advocate for this, but at present it's not possible. So we have to wait, we have to deviate now, Erdogan historically. So for the Euro, just one phrase, and then perhaps the Euro question is not parallel to the crisis issue. The crisis is not felt in Poland because Poland was not part of these transatlantic things which led to the Lehman Brothers crash and which led to other crashes as well. In general, Eastern Europe was somehow profiting of the fact that after their political turn, beginning of the 90s, they did not engage in fiscal and financial adventures at home. So some of the budgets, for instance, Romania, nobody knows that the Romanian budget is relatively balanced, but it is, and that makes things easier. So, but other things are not easy, namely to keep all the criteria of Maastricht to join the European currency, and in that case, it's always a matter of time. But Poland and other countries have successfully kept out their countries of the state debt and financial crisis, although of course they also felt that. But that has nothing to do a priori with the euro. And the euro had a very good external relations. The euro did not dump or whatever. So this is a matter of the real economy, and the real economy somehow survived it, and especially in the bigger countries, whereas in the smaller countries there was a temporary dump, but this dump did not influence the euro because the euro was determined by the European Central Bank, etc. But it had to cope with domestic policy means that is with budget restraints, with austerity measures, also in Greece, and with the delicate and difficult balance of austerity and expenditure, which seems now in Portugal, also in Spain, also in Ireland, and also now in Greece to succeed, as we see at the last attempts to auctioneer and to auction money.
Thanks, thank you. Let's turn to this side of the table on the issues of basically the eurozone. The first question, the convergence and the enlargement days. These were the three comments. If you Dusan and Vladimir, if you wanna comment on or answer the question.
Yes, I'd like first to comment on one point that Vladimir raised, that is welcome the entry of all people into the European Parliament because they contribute to the divergence in the debate. However, my impression from Brussels is that these people don't go to the European Parliament because they have the European audience on their minds. They are there to influence the audience back home. And they do it in a very technical way. They talk in the European Parliament. Sometimes they have 60 seconds at their disposal. This is taped on audio and video, and it's sent back home and distributed to the channels in their national states. They don't affect the European Parliament and the European audience as well. Very often there's no one listening to them. Yeah. But back home they make capital, political capital. Because the European Parliament is constituted in a way that only if the two big essential center-right and center-left fractions come together, decisions are possible. And this will stay for the next 7 years. So extremist thinking in the European Parliament will make it a little bit funnier, but not change it at all. Second point is about convergence and divergence. And Slavisha also said whether the euro is basically the root of the problem. I think that we see more divergence in Europe, not only because of the existence of the euro, but also because of the essential way in which the economy works. If this guy Piketty is right with his data, then the period after the Second War until the outbreak of the debt crisis was a huge exemption in which societies in Europe became more just.
Which debt crisis?
2008.
No, that's not really anyway.
Well, he said that this is a historical period.
Until late 2007.
All right. So
well, that's not all right. That's a different story.
The story is that there was a period in history.
That's correct. Until
which
not 2008, but 70s. Until the 70s.
Good. My point is that the divergence in Europe within the states is increasing, and that people who own more capital earn more money, whereas the people who work, like the middle classes, like we earn less. So the social divergence is increasing, and the divergence between states in Europe is increasing. So Piotr said that this crisis doesn't look like a midwife, that we don't have a sense of where we're going. But if the data that are provided by the economists are correct, we see a very clear path. This is a path which is not keeping the promise, or to use Vladimir's terms, which is not delivering the public goods that are promised. So the question is...
In this sense, I agree.
Yeah, so how are we going to solve this? Are we going to solve it through policies that mean redistribution, which are more social democrat or more statist? Are we going to see more state, both at the national level, and Vladimir pointed out the necessity of a fiscal union at the supranational level? This is something which was anathema until a couple of years ago. So, is Europe moving to a completely new dimension of social distribution? Is it becoming more socialist? I don't know the answer, but to me,
That's my point. But we don't know the answer.
Yeah.
We know the problem.
but in any case, it is certainly not the Europe that used to be. And this has implications on enlargement, two different implications. The Western Balkans are not beyond the limes. The Western Balkans are encircled by the European Union. If you want, like Asterix and Obelix, the small village in Gallia, you know, and the Roman Empire is around it, and there are very few Gauls, Asterix kind of, if you want, of the South Slavs. There are about 20 million that should be easily digested by the European Union if there is a political will. The issue with Turkey and Ukraine is completely different. This is, if you count the populations together, about 120 million, which is 1/5 of the EU's population, which means that the redistribution of wealth in Europe, with having Turkey and Ukraine inside, would be on a grand scale, which would top in France and Germany all over the place.
Thanks. Vladimir definitely had several comments on the euro, and that those questions that
Well,
the euro and the convergence.
right. Well, the euro issue is extremely interesting. And this issue about choosing the proper exchange rate is extremely interesting. If you take the cross-section of countries in Europe or EU, and with or without flexible exchange rates, or with fixed or exchange rates, or our membership of euro, you don't really get a clear answer what is better, because you have countries like Hungary with a flexible exchange rate that hasn't been doing well. You have Poland with a flexible exchange rate, which is certainly a start performer. In this respect, you have Czech Republic, which is here and there. We have Slovakia as a Euro member state, which has done pretty well, and so on. So, if you really want to isolate exactly that element, so take conditional on everything else, you just isolate the effect of the monetary policy or the exchange rate regime, there are basically two issues there. One is the argument that Keynes has made, or Friedman has made, many other people have made for flexible exchange rates, and currently, because Slavisha is an economist, I can quote that. Currently, there's an excellent paper by Michael Woodford on that. So you could certainly have an active monetary policy, let's say in Czech Republic, because Czech Republic is not, or any other country, if it were like that, does not really use, it's not euroized or dollarized or anything like that. So Czech Republic basically uses krona. and if you can, in a sense, have your own currency to be more or less the reserve currency of your country, meaning that you are really having a currency that you can use, that certainly is helpful. Many other countries actually do not have that possibility, and then you have an issue which is actually the crucial one, and that is how much of a wage or wage setting mechanism is under control or not, how much it is market-based, so to speak, simplified. Otherwise, obviously, you will have a danger to have a lower value real exchange rate, and then if you are like in a situation in Croatia where you have an overvalued real exchange rate, which means you have rather to simplify high wages, or you are in a situation like Greece with a similar problem, and not be able to evaluate, even if you had a flexible exchange rate, but for a variety of reasons you essentially have an index economy, then you have a big trouble. Then you are in a big trouble. If you look at, for instance, Croatia, what they have tried is to really have this internal devaluation to get the real wages down, and so that they don't devalue. But that has proved not to be successful. So the alternative way is then to increase productivity by keeping people out of employment. So this depends on what, in principle, Croatia could develop, because it has formally a flexible budget. So these are really the issues that you have in Europe. Now you think about why Greece would not, why it is not popular in Greece to go back to drachma, to get out of euro. Well, because of these alternatives. What is the alternative? The alternative is that you have drachma, but your real currency is actually euro. And that's, so what, and then you have a Greek central bank to worry about, and that is a big worry if it can print money and things like that. So it's actually very interesting that from that point of view, you have a big support for Europe in most Euro member states, and actually the number of countries that have joined Europe has increased after the crisis, and that's where the problem is. So in principle, yes, if you are Serbia, for instance, you actually can use a devaluation mechanism if you are not misguided and do it in a wrong way. That is possible and has actually proved to be good. If you are Macedonia and you haven't had overvalued, or you haven't had two wages that are out of line, you don't actually need that. You can even increase wages, as has been done here, to support growth. And in fact, the record, at least statistics, if you believe the national statistics, the record of Macedonia is relatively good. If you are Poland, and for the same reason haven't actually had, before the crisis, an out of overvalued real exchange rate, because again of the suppression of wages before the crisis, you actually can afford devaluation and even increase in domestic wages, which will support domestic demand, and you have growth. If you're Hungary, and you have allowed, for political reasons, because you needed to first elect Gyurcsány, and then you needed to elect Orban and all these people, and all of these people gave you increases in wages and pensions in order to buy your vote, your flexible exchange rate may not be enough for reasons of essentially eurized country to get out. So that's how complicated that is. So in theory, yes, I would say you would be well advised not to join Europe before you have these issues of wage creation, political economy or political business cycle issues under control. But otherwise, if you don't have them, the flexible exchange rate is very, very tricky thing and not a panacea. As far as convergence is concerned,